Hello and welcome. This is a video lecture on John Milton's sonnet, When I Consider How My Light is Spent. This is a sonnet which was composed in 1673. Before I begin discussing the poem, let me discuss the poet. The poet John Milton was born in 1608 and he passed away in 1674. He was an English poet and he was very famous for having composed Paradise Lost, which was published in 1667. Now, Paradise Lost, for people who do not know, is a Christian epic, and clearly if he's written a Christian epic, if he's composed a Christian epic, we can presume that he was a staunchly Christian person. He belonged to the Puritan sect of Christianity, and for people who do not understand different sects of Christianity, Puritanism is a conservative, a strict form of Christianity which was prevalent in England and much of Europe at that point. He was also a very celebrated poet of England. He was in fact also serving as a bureaucrat in the courts in the kingdom. Now, but at the age of 44, he lost much of his sight and eventually he completely lost his vision. So when he even wrote the Paradise Lost and he composed much of his poetry, he had already lost his vision. This poem is believed to have been written before 1664, but it was published in 1673. Okay, now the poet, when he realizes that his eyesight is completely going to be lost, he's distraught. Clearly, he's distraught by his this realization, and this feeling is expressed in the form of a sonnet. Now, the sonnet is a traditional Italian verse form which contains an octave and a sestet, which has the rhyme scheme of A-B-B-A and A-B-B-A, which is followed by one another, and then you have CDE and CDE. So this is a very conventional form of the sonnet, which is the traditional Italian sonnet. And traditionally, the octave sets off a question. It sets off a dilemma. It asks a question. And the sestet, which is the bunch of 6 lines, which follows the bunch of 8 lines before. So octave is 8 lines and sestet is 6 lines. So the octave starts off a question and sestet actually clears that doubt and answers that question. So here too we see these conventions being followed. So when we look at this poem, you see spent, wide, hide, bent, A-B-B-A. Again, present, chide, denied, prevent, A-B-B-A. And so this is the octave, and the next is the sestet, which is need, best, state, C-D-E, speed, rest, wait, CDE, 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 ABBA, ABBA. This is the octave and the sestet. Similarly, when you talk about the octave and the sestet, the dilemma which is touched upon in the octave is actually cleared off in the sestet. Now, we look at the poem line by line here. Now, the poet begins saying, when I consider how my light is spent, a half my days in this dark world wide, and that one talent which is death to hide, lodged with me useless, though my soul more bent to serve herewith my Maker and present my true account, lest he return chide. Now, I read this entire line because Milton in this poem is actually not completing his entire sentence per line, so I had to read the first 6 lines before, but let's do the first 3 lines. Now here he is referring clearly to his blindness, and he's thinking not only of the light, meaning the way his eyesight is spent, but also how his life is spent. Light, it can also be a symbol of life, okay? How my light is spent. A half my days in this dark world wide. So he says that means before. He says that actually he's has spent much of his life, half of his life, in darkness, and that one talent which is death to hide. Now here he is referring to talent, which is from a parable of the Bible, which is a story of a master who leaves his 3 servants or disciples with talents, or you can call it money, and he asks them to invest these talents, use these talents and do something with it. But what happens is that while 2 of his servants invest these talents, show it to the world, make use of the talents, one of the servants actually just hides the talent. He does nothing with it, and when the master returns from his journey and he sees that all these three servants have done different things, he realizes that one of his servants has not invested any of his talents, he's wasted it away, and the servant is actually punished. Now this is a parable from Matthew 25. I would also upload a quick video version of this beautiful story in my show notes, so you can actually watch this story as well. Now this is the story which he's referring to in these first 3 lines, and he's calling this the talent. Lodged in me, useless. So he's saying that, you know, this talent is actually stuck. Lodge would mean stuck. He's this lodge, it's stuck in him, useless. Though my soul more bent. He says that even though my soul he wants to serve the master with all his soul, with everything that he can, and he wants to present his true account to the master. And present my true account is again a reference to after death, when a person will have to confront God and tell him how he used his life in an account, and the people would have to tell God how they used their life to serve God, right? So Milton also, he says that I want to have a lot to say to God, but I have this, you know, talent stuck in me, even though I want to serve God with all my might. Lest he return chide. He says that I'm willing to use my soul and everything that I can to serve God, and he doesn't want God to come to chide, which means chide would mean scold or to rebuke him. And the word return here again refers to this parable of talents, the fact that when God returns, when the master returns and asks his followers how you used your talents, he should have an answer. So he says that I don't want God to come and chide me, you know, and he says that, you know, God should should not be punishing him for something that he can't help, right? And he says, and then he asks this very strong question. He says, doth God exact day labor light denied? I fondly ask, but patience to prevent. So he asks this question. He says, does God require those without light to labor? Now the word exact would mean charge, and day labor would mean service or work. So he's saying that doth would mean does. So he says that does God also charge people who have been denied of light to work for him? He wants to know whether he can continue when he cannot continue to work because of his blindness. Will God still require work from him? And the word fondly ask it's a naively ask. He wants to say that he's naively asking this question, but patience, which is his internal soul, which is his conscience, and patience has a very coveted, it's a very valued moral quality in Christianity. And he says that patience asks him to not go ahead and ask this question, because this is a very ignorant question for a Christian to ask. So he says that I want to ask this question, but patience prevents me from asking this question. And this is the end of the octave. So we've had 8 lines, and in this he's asking the question of whether if he is unable to use his life in the service of God, would God finally require his day labor? And this is the dilemma that he presents in the first 8 lines. Now the next 6 lines is to resolve this debate. Now let's see how this debate is resolved. That murmur soon replies. So now patience responds to him, says, God doth not need either man's work or his gifts, who best bear his mild yoke, they serve him best. So patient goes on to remind the poet that he does not need special gifts or works to impress God. God does not require man's work or his own gifts. People who bear his mild yoke. Now, what do we mean by mild yoke? Now, yoke is a wooden frame used to be placed around the flowing animal's neck and shoulders, and this would basically allow the person who is controlling this farm animal to go to different directions. So he says that just like a farm animal who is guided by the person who is riding it, similarly we have this yoke around us and we are being guided by God, right? So God therefore does not require any of your gifts, anything very special from people, but only your true servitude. Essentially, people who allow themselves to God's will and who are able to completely follow God's will are the ones who are his true followers. These are the people who are serving him best. So God doth not need either man's work or his own gifts. Who best bear his mild yoke, they serve him best. Now mild, the word mild in Christianity, you would have heard this in many Christmas carols also. It means holy, it means kind, and it means benign. Now here he also is using a poetic technique called enjambment. Now we see that in the first 3 lines of the sestet, he is beginning a sentence because he wants to actually follow the rhyme scheme also, right? So that the sonnet follows the rhyme scheme, he has to start a line, but he is not able to end the line. So this is called an enjambment. Enjambment is a literary device that appears at the end of the line when a phrase is cut off before it's actually stops in its meaning. So his state is actually written in an earlier line, but it gets completed in the next line. His state is kingly, thousands at his bidding speed, and post over land and ocean without rest, they also serve who only stand and wait. Now patient compares God to a king and says that that God is actually kingly. God is like a king and he has thousands of resources, thousands of people who are ready to do his job, which means to do his bidding, right? Thousands at his bidding. In the state that in this world, people are a part of his unlimited resources and they are ready to post, which means he's ready, people are ready to move quickly on land and ocean without pausing for rest, and they clearly want to serve God. But the poem ends on the note that even though some people in God's kingdom are unable to travel or move around to serve him, the service of even the ones who patiently wait for him is equally valuable. So even though Milton is not able to serve God completely because of his blindness, the fact that he has true devotion in his heart and he's waiting for God to save him, that is enough. Okay, so this goes very well with the Christian puritanical faith that Milton had. If you want to read a little more about Milton's Christianity, you would be able to understand this poet much better. But this is how he ends the poem. This was the poem. Thank you very much. I'll continue with a different poem next time.